Hi everyone, that's right, it's Monday again, Bible study, and we've been going through the books of the Bible. We started from Genesis, we're all the way up to Ruth today, so this is exciting. We get to talk about a whole nother book of the Bible, and you know what I'm going to say. I say it every week. What do I say? I said, buy me the t-shirt. This one's my favorite, right? Well, it is a great one, I have to say. It's a well-loved book, but before I'm going to give a couple of minutes for people to just come on, just a couple of minutes, and see how everybody is. Has everyone had a good week this week? Is everyone doing well? Is everyone feeling strong? You know, I know we're getting closer and closer to lockdown being, for the most part, eradicated. There'll always be some kind of distancing measures, but I'm hearing all sorts of stuff on the news today about all children going back to school in September, or a large amount of them. I'm hearing about pubs and restaurants opening with some social distancing going on, but just opening, and shops being open. So, hello everyone, good morning. Good morning, Philippa, June, hi, hello. Welcome everyone, that's wonderful. You're all coming on there. But yeah, it's been a great week. It's been a good week. I've had a good time with my family, good time with my kids. I'm trying to kind of savor the moments now, because I realized that it's all going to end. Lockdown will be over, and this was just a season, where we were stuck in the house with our families and stuff, right from, March when it was cold to now it's June and we're all sweating, and I'm just trying to savor the last bits of all that, because life's going to go back to normal at some point. So hello, happy Monday, Maria and Yan and Dawn and Norman. Hello. It's good to have you all there. Well, why don't we get started? Okay. Well, we talked about last week, we were in the Book of Judges, and I almost felt like I had to apologize for the Book of Judges because of how dark. It was pretty dark, the Book of Judges, because it has that statement in it that says that there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So there was no good leadership, and people were not following God. Zip. And it was a dark, dark time in history. And then follows on with the Book of Ruth. Now, one would almost think, what is this sweet love story doing in the Bible? What does it even mean, and why is it stuck in there? And it does absolutely have its place. It's called the Book of Ruth, based on the character in the book, Ruth. And it's unusual that it's named after a woman. Yes, a book named after a woman. Not usually done. There's only one other time when it's done. Does anyone know what that is? Can I see? Does anyone want to have a guess of the other woman book? Anybody? Anybody know? You've all gone silent. All right, I'm just going to tell you. It's Esther, the Book of Esther. That's right. So the only other book named after a woman is the Book of Esther. Okay, so Ruth. Ruth means friend, or comeliness, or beauty. Those are the meanings of the name Ruth. This is also known as the Book of Grace. The authorship is unknown. They're not exactly sure who wrote the Book of Ruth. They're not exactly sure, but it's attributed to the prophet Samuel. So a lot of people believe, because of the style, because of the time period they believe it was written, that it was the prophet Samuel. So this book is sort of a joy to read. That's right, Philippa got it. It's Esther. Esther was the book. That's right, the other woman book. This book only has 4 chapters. It's a joy to read, because you can read it in 15-20 minutes. It has a happy ending. It's just a perfect little book, of encouragement and beauty. Really well written as well. Just beautiful. It's if you're looking for a little encouragement, something lovely from the Bible, Book of Ruth. And who doesn't enjoy a love story, okay? Everybody enjoys a love story, okay? Even people who say they don't enjoy a love story, they do. They enjoy a love story. But being part of the Bible, a simple love story is never just a simple love story, is it? But rather it's an account of history. It's a history book. It's considered one of the historical books of the Old Testament, and it's alive with God's Spirit, and it is pregnant with a message to humanity of God's ultimate plan to redeem us from sin and death. It covers 11 years during the days of the Judges. It's believed to be written approximately around the same time as the Book of Judges, and one of the purposes of the Book of Ruth is to portray a positive picture of grace from the period of Judges, being that it was a time when that was godless and sinful, violent, a time when people didn't obey God's commands. So this is one little picture of beauty in the time of the Judges. Because last week, I had to tell story after story about bad judges and wars and blood and killing, and because that was the Judges. That was the time of the Judges. Might made right. That was the kind of the motto of the time of the Judges. So it was like lots of blood and gore. But now, in the time of the Judges, takes place the Book of Ruth. So we see three main characters in this book. One being a man who's a very rare character for those times, because it was the times of the Judges. Now you might be like, what am I on about? And I haven't begun speaking of the chapters yet. But the Book of Ruth opens up. Ruth 1:1 says, "Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land." So they want to place this story so you know when it's happening. So it was during the times of the Judges. So in those times, people were not following God. People were lawless for the most part. And there's this unusual character, this man called Boaz. And he's a rare character. And he helps to restore a lost inheritance through obedience, through his obedience. You also have to note about this character Boaz, who his mom and dad were. Okay, do you remember Rahab the Harlot, who helped the children of Israel with a bit of a bargain? And she said, "Listen, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you, and you're going to help me. I'm going to help save you, and you are going to save my whole family when the walls of Jericho come down. I'm going to be saved and my family." And they said, "Yes, absolutely." So that is when she hid the spies, the Israelite spies, and she let down the scarlet cord out of the window so they knew which place was hers, so they knew which place to save. Rahab is Boaz's mom, and the father is a man called Salmon. Salmon was an Israelite, so he had seen all these amazing things. The parting of the Jordan for them to get into the promised land, and he'd heard all the stories from his ancestors of all the parting of the Red Sea. This was a godly couple, Rahab and Salmon, and they had Boaz. So you wonder why Boaz was such a man of high morale and a lover of God, even in those times, because he had great parents who instilled this in him. Okay, so it's good to note that. Okay, then we have the character, then we have Boaz, then we have Ruth. Ruth lives up to her name, and her name, as I said, means friend and beautiful. So she is a beautiful friend because she chooses to remain with and look after Naomi, her mother-in-law, rather than to pursue her own future. Ruth could go off and do her own thing, but she decides, no, I want to stay with my mother-in-law. I want to serve the God that my mother-in-law serves. And so she's walking away. Ruth is walking away from her Moabite culture, because you know that Ruth is not Israelite. She is from outside. She is a Moabite. So she's walking away from her culture and her gods and everything to serve Yahweh, to serve the Almighty. And lastly, we have Naomi, who is the mother-in-law, Ruth's mother-in-law, who begins the story with so much loss and emptiness. But we see restoration and redemption brought to her life by the end. And there's some different perspectives that people have about Naomi. Some people say, yes, she was a lover of God. And some people say she actually wasn't that much of a lover of God due to some choices that she had made and some things that she says throughout the book. not exactly sure how I feel about Naomi. I read about her and I see some of the things she did. And yes, her life and her choices and some of the things she says do puzzle me. But I'm trying not to judge her. Now we have to remember also that from the Old Testament, although I'm not judging these people, what the point of some of the characters in this account and in other accounts in the Old Testament is they are character studies for us to judge ourselves. We need to judge ourselves by what the Word of God is telling us about the characters that we're reading about. So we're to judge ourselves by what they do, how they do things, their faith, their actions. So I'm rather not judging Naomi for some of the things she's done and said, but I'm rather looking at myself and saying, do I do that? Have I been found doing that? Maybe I shouldn't do that, or things like that, okay? So I don't like to look at her as a not noble character, but as someone I can learn from. Okay, so we do see beautiful restoration and redemption by the end of her life, okay? And we will look at that as we go through the chapters. The Book of Ruth also establishes the genealogy of David, which is very important and which is why it is important historically in the Old Testament. Okay, so there's so much goodness packed into 4 short chapters. So let's have a closer look. All right, chapter 1. The Book of Ruth opens up with the sentence, as I said before, Ruth 1:1. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. Now, it is good we did the Book of Judges, otherwise you wouldn't know what that means in the day of the judges. You just think, oh, they had a lot of legal system stuff going on. But we know about the Book of Judges because you will have heard the last Bible study. Very dark time in the history of Israel, very godless. People did not know how to relate to the living God because they didn't know the law anymore. They didn't do what Moses and Joshua said. It is good to take that into account as you read the entire book of Ruth, that it is the day of the judges, okay? And this gives the account of Ruth a setting. Okay, so we're in the lawless, dangerous times of the judges, and we're being reminded that there's no king right from the start of the story. But it ends in chapter 4 with a genealogy. Okay, Ruth chapter 4 ends with a genealogy that ends with the birth of David, who was one of Israel's greatest kings, if not the greatest king of the Old Testament for Israel. So we're being teed up for a time when Israel will be ruled by kings. Okay, we also see at the start of this book a family man named Elimelech. Now, Elimelech's name means my God is king. And they are a family. Elimelech is Naomi's husband. And they live in Bethlehem Ephrathah, which is Bethlehem. And the name Bethlehem Ephrathah means house of bread and fruitfulness, okay? Because it's in the promised land, house of bread and fruitfulness. And they're an Israelite family, and they're making the choice to leave the land of promise because, as it opens up in Ruth 1:1, they're in the day of the judges, and there was a famine in the land. So there's this terrible famine, and Elimelech and Naomi have made this decision, even though they're from the land called House of Bread and Fruitfulness. Ironically, they are choosing to leave. They're leaving the land of promise. Now, they're going on to a place called Moab, which is notoriously noted for its idolatry and not being a godly place at all. And now the narrator of Ruth is not saying what Elimelech did is wrong. He's sort of leaving it to the reader to decide. But as the reader reads this about a man called My God is King, living in a land called House of Bread and Fruitfulness, which is the land of promise that the Israelites, fought to get into, something just doesn't sit right inside that that they're leaving and going to Moab, a place of terrible idolatry. It just doesn't sit right, and it's not supposed to, I don't believe. Now note that there is a famine in the land. Now God's land of promise to his children is in famine. All right. Now, Again, the narrator does not say why the land is in a famine, but we can assume, we can guess that it could be because they're all living in disobedience. They are away from God. They're not looking at the law anymore and worshiping God. They're worshiping idols. Now, Moses and Joshua in the books of the law spoke of the curses that would come upon them if they were to walk away from God. If they were to no longer serve the Lord God, they were told very outright that a lot of curses would come upon them. So although it doesn't outright say that this is why there's a famine, again, the narrator sort of just puts it in there. And I wonder if we're meant to think about, I wonder if things were different and they were worshipers of God and the land would repent and turn, that God would heal their land. You know, it's a thought. It's worth thinking about as you read the book of Ruth. Okay, so like I said, there's irony that they're leaving a place that is named abundance. And we see Elimelech and his sons, they go to Moab. The sons marry Moabite women, so they're not within their tribe. Although in reading some different things about this, Israelites were not forbidden to marry Moabite women. So they weren't in outright sin, but they also were an idolatrous people. So just putting it out there again, something to consider when you're reading the book of Ruth. Okay, so Ruth's sister-in-law is called Orpah. Obviously, they're not Israelites, Moabites. The sons meet them in Moab. This is probably a real decent family. I'm not saying they're a horrible family, Elimelech's family and Naomi. There's every evidence that they are godly people. That they serve God. They're also in a very bad culture, and so one of the things about being in the culture that God told them that they needed to, conquer the whole land and take it over and destroy all the idolatry was because idolatry was going to get into them and the culture of sin was going to get into them. And I wonder if, and we'll look at this a little later, if some of the culture around them inadvertently got into them and into their belief system. Okay, we will look at that. All right, so where are we? Okay, yeah, because later we're going to look at Naomi a little closer, and we're going to look at some of her decisions and some of the things she says, and we'll wonder, where is Naomi with God? Where is she in all this? Okay, so Elimelech and his family, they go to Moab. This is where the sons find wives. They live there for 10 years, and during that time, very sadly, Elimelech and his 2 sons die. They do not say how they die. Funny enough, the 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, their names mean sickly, and the other one is something like one who cries a lot or something like that. So they've got very unfortunate names. I don't know why they died, but they both have names that allude to the fact that maybe they weren't very well, okay? I don't know. So, another one to consider in the book of Ruth. Lots of things to look at, symbolisms and names and things that mean things. And, we can look at this story and see what the narrator is saying in a deeper way. Okay, the life of a childless widow, which Naomi is now, of her age, is not going to be a good one in this day and age. She's poor, she has nothing, she has no one to look after her. So she decides that now she's in Moab, right? This is where all this treachery happened, all this sadness. She's going to go back to Bethlehem because in verse 6 it says, she heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Now remember, that was called Bethlehem, the house of bread. And funny enough, the Lord visits. She heard this rumor during a famine that the Lord had visited this land and had blessed the fields. And so there was food in Bethlehem. I wonder if they had waited it out. Would they have been part of the blessing that was going on there? Anyway, she's going to head back there. Okay. So she's set to go back to Bethlehem with her 2 daughters-in-law. When she says to the girls, Naomi says this, and she means well, she really does. she looks at the girls and she says, you should return to your family homes, to your culture, and to your gods. So paraphrased, she's saying, girls, you need to go back. It's the sure thing, okay? Go back to your gods. And, you're going to find husbands there. I've got nothing to offer you. I've got no sons anymore. If you come with me to Bethlehem, you'll just be foreigners. Nobody will want to know you. And that makes me a little sad. And this is one of those things that I question about Naomi, because Naomi outright says, go back to your culture, go back to your gods. You have a better chance there. Basically, she's saying, I think that Shamash, which is the god that she would be serving in Moab primarily, because they are polytheistic, she's saying, he's got more for you than Yahweh has for you. He'll probably do better for you than my God will. So why don't you just go back? And I have a problem with that. I have a problem that she really thinks they'll do better in life without the one and true living God, because she'll have a husband and children, than to be serving the Almighty God, who is the one and only, who said, serve me and serve me alone. I have a little problem with that with Naomi, and it makes me question, why would you say that, Naomi? Why would you give these girls the worst advice ever, So tragically, Naomi is believing that possibly the gods of Moab could do more for Ruth, and which I think is awful. So anyway, well, another thing to notice here is Ruth, who is a Moabitess, has more faith in Israel's God than Naomi has. Okay, so you need to look at the differences between Naomi and Ruth. Ruth, is new to all this. Naomi is an old hat at this, and she, Ruth knows better. Ruth has a deeper faith, what you'll see. Anyway, Orpah agrees to go back to her people and her culture. And you know what? We never hear about Orpah again. Never. Not through the whole story, not mentioned once. But we see that Ruth is different. She says to Ruth, right? Don't come with me, Ruth. This is, Naomi's really getting on her now. Don't come with me, Ruth. You go back. You get yourself a husband. You serve your other gods. Nobody will want you in Bethlehem. You'll be a foreigner. But Ruth's response in verse 16 and 17 says this. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. And Ruth is saying, I want to serve your God. I want to serve the one true living God. You're my family now, and I'm not leaving you, Naomi. And she even says of herself, Ruth says this, may the Lord kind of curse me if I don't do as I'm saying. So she's even invoking upon herself the right for the Lord to just curse her should she not follow him. She believes so ultimately. And it is right there, not the curse bit, but the part where she says, your God is my God. I'm not leaving you. I'm not leaving you. That's Ruth's statement of faith. This is her conversion statement. This is how we know Ruth has forsaken the gods of the Moabites and the culture of the Moabites and says, I want in, God. I want to be in with the one true God, with Yahweh. I don't care if I'm going to be a foreigner. I don't care if I get that abuse. Naomi, I want to stay with you through thick and thin, because it's better that I stay with you and be in poverty and have no husband and no children, and to serve the right, to serve the living God, than to serve a false God and have everything else, because then my ultimate destiny and the root of all of it is wrong. And Ruth gets that. This is her conversion right here. Okay? And she understands that there's a no turning back now. There's no turning back. She's like, and there's this belief amongst the Israelites and ancient cultures that the place where you choose to die, is where your heart is. So Naomi, remember, she wants to go back because she hears there's bread there. So it's out of necessity. Where Ruth is like, I'm going back. I'm going back with you. Come on, I'm going to help you get back there, Naomi. Because Ruth knows, I want to be in the land of promise. I want to be where my God is, with the land that he gave to his people, because now I'm one of them, Okay, so, And it says that Naomi saw how determined Ruth was, and so she said no more. She's like, okay, whatever, Ruth, you come with me. Anyway, so they went on foot, a 50-mile journey. Now, it doesn't say this, but there are actually tours that do the trek from Moab to Bethlehem on foot. That you could actually go on one of these treks to see what these women went through. And the trek is 50 miles. It takes between 7 and 10 days. It's very rough, rugged terrain. It would not be easy for two women alone in the day of the judges, an evil and dark time when people, they didn't look at, oh, two women over there, I'm going to be kind to them. No, they would take advantage of such a situation. They'd be sleeping out under the stars, all exposed. Not to mention, okay, the people, bad enough, there would be wild animals. And when I'm not talking like raccoons, I'm talking like lions, okay, and bears. That's what they would be up against, all right? So even though it says, it kind of skips from, and they went back to Bethlehem, there's a 50-mile journey there that you mustn't forget happened, okay? So in a sense, this journey, Ruth was like, I'm up for this. I could go the way of ease and stay in my country, but I am up for this journey, Naomi. Let's do it. The journey of faith. Let's do it, because that's where I want to be, the land of promise. So we can't just glance over this little bit as just a little connective between real issues. The real issue is they went on a harsh journey, two women alone. Okay, so time of the judges, dark time, big journey, not a pleasure trip. So they eventually arrive in Bethlehem, and everyone recognizes Naomi, and they're so happy to see her. And she says, right away, don't call me Naomi. Now, I'm not judging her, because this is a harsh journey. She lost her sons. She lost her husband. She's poor. She's had it hard, okay? So I'm not judging her. I'm trying not to judge her, okay? I'm trying to judge me by this. Would I do this? In hard times, do I do this? She's quite bitter. And she says, don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara, because that means bitter. And this is what she says in verse 21. She's blaming God for all her troubles. I went out full and now I'm empty. And she says, God has afflicted me. So she's really laying it on thick, and she's blaming God for all her troubles. And Ruth, remember this, she is just as sad. She is also a widow. She is also childless. And we're approximating her age. They're not sure of her age, people who've studied this, scholars. But it's anywhere from late 20s to maybe in her 30s. So she's not a spring chicken anymore by their standards, okay? But her attitude is so different. The point is this, that I learned from this section, that we could all look at a place of trouble in our lives and blame God. Very easy to do. It is a natural response, but it is the wrong response, okay? Naomi is forgetting that it was her husband who left the land of promise to look for blessing outside of the promise of God. And if he had remembered the law of Moses and the law and Joshua and what they taught the people, they would have known that to choose to live in a land of sin, Moab, that it was always going to end bad. She left the house of bread, which seemed good at the time, but the blessing of God, we have to remember, is over his promise, and it's not outside of his promise. Naomi can be viewed as a type of Israel, okay? She's a type of Israel that seems abandoned by God, because Israel right now, lots of bad is happening in the day of the judges. Lots of turmoil and lots of fighting and bloodshed and bad things, right? And Naomi kind of, in one person, sort of characterizes the whole of Israel, like as if abandoned by God, and isn't left in a bad way. But again, Israel also was forgetting, just like Naomi was forgetting, that it was through disobedience that this great darkness was brought upon them. It was their own fault. And, not necessarily, just so you know, when bad times come, it's not necessarily the fault of the person. If somebody gets a terrible disease, if somebody has hard times, it's not necessarily the sin they committed. But remember, we live in a fallen world, a world where sin is... It speaks of, in Genesis, how sin is even it even affected the earth, the very ground, you know. So it's just a fallen world. You can't blame yourselves unless you know that you're in disobedience. And Naomi's husband caused the disobedience to a degree. He left the land of promise, okay? And she's completely forgetting, you know, her part of why there's great darkness now. And Israel was forgetting that as well. So they were blaming God for abandoning them. Now this chapter 1, ends with a barley harvest about to start. So we go straight into chapter 2. Now Ruth is going, they're there in Bethlehem now, and right away, Ruth is going gleaning in the fields of a relative called Boaz. Straight away, she's making it home. She's not complaining. She's not whining. She has a great attitude. Now, I'm not saying, this is what I am saying. Why is Naomi not out gleaning? Now, it doesn't say she's ill or infirm. We're imagining her to be in her 50s, not terribly old, probably quite able-bodied. And again, it's just a question. It's you know, maybe she was infirm. Doesn't say it. Was it beneath her? I don't know. Was she being prideful? I don't know. We don't know. That's why it's hard to judge Naomi, because we don't know some stuff, okay? Maybe she wasn't well. I mean, Ruth wanted to look after her, right? I mean, she had just done this 50-mile journey, and she seemed to get there intact. I don't know. Like I said, I don't want to judge her, all right? I'm just saying there are some things to consider. Okay. Gleaning. Now Ruth's gone gleaning in a field. What is gleaning? Okay. Gleaning is a plan of God that was written into the law. And it was all God's idea. Okay. This is part of the law that he gave to Moses, and that we would have seen in the book of, we would see this in the book of Deuteronomy when the law was given. And it's to help the poor. The command is Deuteronomy 24:19, and this is the exact bit of the law that speaks of gleaning. When you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. That means you're doing some harvesting, you're picking up all the wheat and the barley and whatever, you're wrapping it. Should you forget a sheaf or two, just leave it there. Just leave it. Don't pick it up. Leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. One commentary that I read said that it could be up to 25% of a farmer's field that was left sitting in the field left to glean. And you know what that spoke of? That spoke of the generosity of God, and also the obedience of the farmer, because you could go back and get the sheaf. Nothing's stopping you. The only thing that would be stopping you was your respect for God and your respect for humanity, for wanting to help the poor, the widows, you know. And Boaz is such a man. He is a man who has great love for God and respect for God and the law, and great respect for his fellow humans, and wanted to help them. Okay, so this is one of the first instances where we see that Boaz is a very godly man who obeys the law. In those days, a very rare thing, right? Because we say this, everybody did what was right in their own eyes. If it was right in their own eyes, if this is my field, I'm not sharing my stuff with anybody. Yeah, I'll leave 1 or 2 twigs, but that's it. No, it's obvious that there are people gleaning in this field, and Ruth joins with them. Okay. So even in this age of great darkness, God has a remnant of followers, and Boaz is one of them. And they follow hard after God. And even though they may be few, because it said it was very hard in the time of the judges to find judges, because the quality of the judges was so poor, because the quality of the people's love for God was so impure. Okay. So, even in dark days, we see that there will be a remnant. And they might be fewer in number, as compared to those who reject God. But look at throughout the Bible, we have Noah, again, a remnant that was left in a great time of darkness. Not many went into that ark. because there weren't many who would believe the word of the Lord. How about in the time of Jezebel? It said Jezebel had almost annihilated all the prophets of God, and that there was one man called Obadiah who saved 100 prophets of God by putting 50 in each cave and hiding them from the evil Jezebel and King Ahab, because they were looking to destroy any mark of God in the society, and they wanted, the darkness to rule. Why would you want that, Okay. Anyway, so yes, there is a remnant, and Boaz is part of that remnant during the book of Judges, and Ruth as well. Now, if Naomi represents Israel, then in Ruth, we see how God is foreshadowing the plan to extend his redemption to the Gentiles. And that excites me because I'm Gentile, I'm not Jewish. And that's what a Gentile is. It is a non-Jewish person. So, okay, here in chapter 2, we're going to see something called God's providence. Okay, what is providence? What does this word mean? The providence is this: the idea that God guides our steps, putting us in situations that accomplish his divine plans. Okay, do you believe in providence? Because I have to tell you, I really do. And I really do because it's based on Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Let me read that to you. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. You see, I really do believe that the child of God, but it is a you do this and I'll do this kind of promise. We discussed those once. It says, you do this, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and I'll do this. Oh, and acknowledge him in all your ways. And then I shall direct your paths. Okay? So are you trusting in the Lord with all your heart? Are you leaning not on your own understanding? And what that means is that even though the situation might look bleak, or it doesn't look like it's going the way God said it would go, you're looking at it with your understanding. Let's not look at it with our understanding. Let's look at it with faith, okay? Are you looking at it through the lens of faith and acknowledging God in all of your ways, okay? All of your ways. Are you letting God have full reign of your heart? Then he shall direct your paths. It is a promise of God. Let me just share a quick little story about that. I started homeschooling about 6 years ago. I just felt it in my heart. I thought, you know what, I really would love to homeschool my children. And it just was really beginning to burn in my heart to do this. So 6 years ago, I took my three youngest kids. I got 5 kids, but I took the 3 youngest and I just pulled them out of school and I started homeschooling them, and I was doing the best I could with what I had. I didn't know many homeschoolers. I knew a few, and what worked for them wasn't working for me. What they were using, different books and things, I found really hard. It just, that's the way it was. So it was September. It was a September when I started. And I did it. I said, I'm going to do this and see how it goes for a few months. So September, October, November, December, 4 months. I went to December and it was going so bad. My homeschooling was going so bad. The kids would end up crying. I would end up crying. It was so hard. I felt like I was really failing my children, and I was failing me, and I was failing God. I felt like a failure. And I said, God, I really felt in my heart that you wanted me to homeschool. I guess I was wrong. Anyway, one day I was particularly troubled. And I got up super early. It was a Sunday morning. I mean, super early because I couldn't sleep. I was that troubled by the homeschooling situation. And I woke up. It must have been about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. And I just went down and I made myself a cup of tea and I sat on the couch. And I started to pray. And this is how my prayer went. I said, God, I said, with everything in me, I really believed that you wanted me to homeschool. I said, I think I got it wrong. I said, I can't do it anymore. I have no ability anymore. I've come to the end of myself, and I'm done. I can't do it anymore unless you help me. Could you help me? I said, if you help me, then I'll know you want me to homeschool. I said, God, you've got to make this easy for me, and I don't even know where to begin. Don't even know where to begin. That was a Sunday morning. And I said this. I said, Lord, if you don't help me, if I don't sense it's you wanting me to do this, then as of January, when the kids go back to school, because it was over Christmas break, I said, I am going to get the kids at our local school, okay? I'm going to sign them up. And I just said, because then that'll be a sign to me, Lord, that that's what you want. Anyway, that morning, I prayed and I gave it to God. And I got ready for church. I went to church with the family. We got there, and we have a time in church when after the service where we have our coffee and our tea, and we greet people and we say hello to everybody, and we particularly go up to the strangers and the people we don't recognize so that they feel welcome, right? Which is normal. And so that's what I was doing. It was Javalicious, and I went up to a group of people, about a couple that we knew, and then they had a friend with them, a man. And I went up and I said, hello, welcome, how'd you come to us today? Anyway, this man says to me, the one that I didn't recognize, this man, he says, hi, I'm from, what did he say? Oh, he said, I own a school. He said, but I support homeschoolers as well. And I just was like, what? This is the very same morning that I prayed. I said, what do you do? He said, I support homeschoolers. I said, oh, wow. I said, what brought you here today? He said, oh, my friends said, would you come and visit this church today that we're going to go and visit? It was a one-off. The guy never came to church again, to our church. But he came through that particular day, and I said, listen, you support homeschoolers. I'm a homeschooler, and I need support. Can you help me? The very next day, I contacted this man and his wife, and they had the most perfect program for me to homeschool with. I sat with them. They showed me how to use the program, and for the last 6 years, I've been using this program without a hitch. It's been easy. My children are getting educated. It was perfect for me, and God knew, and He directed my steps, that I should be at church, that I should walk. I mean, I could have gone up to any of the people in that room, and I went up to this man, and I said, hello, so what do you do for a living? Why would sometimes I don't ask people right out, what do you do for a living? And it's a weird question, and I did it. I asked him, and he told me, and I just was flabbergasted, but I thanked the Lord, and I said, this was providence. Lord, you directed my steps, because I prayed, and because I said, Lord, I don't know how it's going to happen, but you're going to have to help me with this. And He did. And that's just a little example in my life, one of many, where God has directed my steps, okay? And so let me read you Ruth chapter 2, verse 3. And this is Ruth this is about. And she happened to come to a part of the field where she was gleaning, belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Oh, she just happened to come to part of a field that belonged to her father-in-law, this man Boaz. I don't think this was an accident. This was providence. But she was led to this place. God's leading, let me just tell you, so you know, God's leading may not seem, supernatural. Oh, I saw lights and, it lit up and I just knew. It might seem really just like a good idea, or some kind of thought just pops into your head to do something, or to go somewhere, or to bless somebody, or I need to call this person and tell them something, or give them a scripture. These thoughts, you think they're just popping into your head. Did you ever consider it could be the Holy Spirit? It could be God guiding your footsteps, okay? He's very supernatural, but He works in very natural ways as well, okay? And sometimes you can mistake something that seems so normal, so everyday, a good idea, I just had this thought. I think I should drop some groceries around that person's house. Those are God ideas, and you need to go with them, okay? Okay, and if you are a person, right, who's trusting God to lead you, and you're acknowledging God in all of your ways, you're trusting Him, and you're making your way through life prayerfully, I don't believe you're going to miss it. I believe He's going to guide your footsteps, okay? I do believe that. And it may not seem perfect every moment. Look, they came from a place in Moab where, Elimelech died and the sons died, and it was not a great place. Was God guiding their footsteps then? I do believe it, that He was. I believe He was guiding them, and He was guiding them to the place that He wanted to get them, okay? So even when things don't look right, lean not on your own understanding. Lean not. Lean on faith. Faith and trust in God. Even when I cannot see it, He's working, okay? All right, so she's in this field that she just happened to be in. Here we go. Sorry, I'm just breaking my gear here. Anyway, she's noticed by Boaz, okay? Sorry, I have my helper here. fixing. Oh, thank you very much. And so she meets Boaz, and he says, listen, Ruth, don't go into other fields, because you might not be safe. Stay in my field, you're going to be safe. Stay with the ladies who glean in my field, and I've instructed my men, they're not to come near you, not to bother you, touch you, no cat calls, none of that. None of that allowed in my field. You're safe here. No one's going to bother you. And she's overwhelmed by his kindness, and she says, I'm a foreigner. Why would you take notice of me? And he answers this, and he says, Boaz replied, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother and your homeland, and have come to live with a people that you did not know before. That's Ruth chapter 2, verse 11. And what I love about this is that her choice to serve and honor God through her actions, her lifestyle and her choices, all good ones, it gets noticed. It gets noticed, okay? But she has no entitlement issues here. She's shocked. She's not like, yeah, I've been working hard. I chose to serve God. That's right. He better get me some grain. What a terrible attitude that would have been, that entitlement. But rather, she said, I'm a foreigner. I don't deserve anything. And you're blessing me in this way. And she's so humbled by this and grateful. And her attitude is beautiful. And I love how she gets noticed by Boaz. Now, Boaz, okay, so we said Naomi is sort of a portrait of the whole of Israel. Ruth is sort of a portrait of the Gentile now coming to God and God making that way open. Boaz is a portrait of Christ, okay? He foreshadows Christ. He's a very Christ-like figure in how he's described, in his integrity. And you want to know something? The things that Ruth did, not to be noticed, but to glorify God and to honor God. Things like looking after her mother-in-law. Things like making the decision to walk away from a culture that dismisses God. Things like to no longer have idolatry in her life, but to serve the one and only true God. All these things were noted by Boaz. God sees everything you do. Every beautiful choice that you have ever made, everything that you laid down as an offering to God through your actions, and God, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to give this for you. I'm going to set aside this money. Things we've done in secret, things that we thought nobody could see. Jesus sees. He sees it, and he is a rewarder of people who do those things in secret for his honor. For his honor. Isn't that beautiful? I love that. So she's genuinely shocked that her hard work's been noticed, okay? So Boaz, this picture of Christ, even to the fact that his field is a barley field, which, barley's for making bread. Who is Jesus? Jesus is the bread of life, right? So remember, there's a famine in the world. There's a famine, okay? And in this time of want and hunger, Boaz's field is blessed with enough grain that he can help people, that he's helping all these women who are gleaning in his field, probably widows, probably people who are poor. I know Ruth is amongst those, and he's got a field where he's blessing. In a time of famine, he is blessing and giving, and God is blessing his field. And as God is blessing his field, this beautiful person that God, this portrayal of Jesus, a heart like Jesus, to give to the poor, to help the poor. This is what I want in my life. And I've said this when we talked earlier in the book of Genesis about Joseph and how in that time there was a famine. And you know what Joseph did? Joseph stored grain away and saved the whole of Egypt and all of his people. You know what? Let us each have that desire in our hearts, that we, in a time of famine, that could be anything. That could be a literal famine. That could be a time of terrible economics in the world, and there are hungry people around you. This could be a time, a famine of someone's health, a famine of someone's joy, a famine in whatever way, whatever is not there. Let us say to God, you know what, God, use me. Bless me. Let me be the instrument that you use, Father, that I will be obedient, and just like Boaz did, I will leave bits out for those people to collect. Bits from my life. I'll give them my time. I'll give them my energy. I'll give them my finances. I'll give them my prayer. I'll give them my ear so that I can listen to their troubles and maybe half their troubles, you know. This is what we need to be. We need to be like this beautiful, obedient man in a time of famine, using what God has blessed him with. And you might be saying, but I don't have anything. You have something. You have something. And my advice to you would be this. Use the little that you have in your life to bless people with. Even a little bit. And remember, Jesus sees it. He sees it. And what he said to her, Boaz said to her, is, may the Lord bless you, Ruth, according to what you've done, according to the things that you've done for your mother-in-law and turning from your old culture. You know, and my words to you are, may it be to you, that the Lord would bless you as you make the right decisions, as you do these things to honor God, because blessing people is honoring God. Okay, blessing those without is honoring God. As you do those things, you know, and do them as unto God, to honor God, not for your own honor, you watch how God will honor you, okay? And you'll have even more to bless with. Okay, so it even gets to the point where Boaz is looking after Ruth so well that he even invites her to come and eat with the people who are gathering and with himself. They all eat together. And in that culture, that's a big deal. That's a real embrace when you invite people to eat in that culture. It's like, come in, you're one of us. You know, he's not treating her like some outside woman, you know, even though she is to a degree. He's saying, come in, be with us. And what a picture of Christ. As we come from our old life of sin, and we come into a new life where it's all foreign to us. The embrace of others, the other people around us, Christians, their embrace, and the embrace of Jesus, how he just receives us in, not as a foreigner, but one of his own. Beautiful. Okay. So she goes home at the end of the day. She's loaded up with barley. She's had a great day, you know, and she goes and tells Naomi, I met Boaz and I was in his field, and Naomi is just over the moon. Okay, so takes us to chapter 3. So Naomi now is like, I want you to marry Boaz, all right? Who wouldn't want that for their daughter, right? I mean, she says, you'll have security if you do that. He's one of our relatives. Now, the word that she uses for he is one of our relatives in chapter 3, verse 2, is a word which is in Hebrew called goel, okay? And it means kinsman redeemer, and it's used quite often in the book of Ruth. And it was based on a custom in ancient Israel. Whoever was the goel, of the family, had responsibilities. The kinsman redeemer, the goel. And these are a few of the things that the kinsman redeemer was responsible for in a family. Okay, they were responsible to buy a fellow Israelite out of slavery. That was from Leviticus 25:48. He was responsible to be an avenger of blood. That means if there was a murder in the family, that he was required to bring justice for the family. That's Numbers 35:19. Leviticus 25:25. He was responsible to buy back family land that had been forfeited, usually because of debts. And he was responsible to carry on the family name by marrying a childless widow. That was Deuteronomy 25, 5 through 10. Now in this, we see that the goel, the kinsman redeemer, and Boaz is the kinsman redeemer. He was responsible to safeguard the persons, the property, and the posterity, which means the descendants of the family. Big job, big job. So Ruth could legally appeal to him to safeguard the posterity of Elimelech's family, her father-in-law. And she could ask, could you take me in marriage? And it was 100% proper. So Ruth, at Naomi's advice, says, listen, Ruth, take off your mourning clothes, put on something pretty. I want you to smell pretty. And after the big barley, gathering, Boaz is going to be asleep on the threshing floor with some of the other workers. I want you to take note where he is, and I want you to go and lay down at his feet. I know this is all a bit weird here, but I'll explain it in a second. I want you to uncover his feet while he's sleeping, and I want you to lay there and just wait for what happens. And then when he wakes up, I want you to basically ask him to marry you. Okay? Now, this was a weird custom. It's not super well understood by people who have studied this, but it is believed that it was understood that it was a very humble, it wasn't a sexual thing, okay? You need to understand it was not a sexual thing. There was nothing of impropriety happening here. But it was a humble way to approach someone in a situation like this, where you're going to now be speaking to your goel about what you need for them to do. So it was Ruth saying, basically, paraphrase, I respect you, I trust you, and I put my fate in your hands. And yes, this could have all gone terribly wrong had Boaz not been a good man. He could have taken advantage of her in a threshing floor house, because he would have slept with the grain, because remember, this is the time of the judges and people would come and sometimes steal all the harvest. So that's why he was in the threshing floor, sleeping there in the first place. But what we are to notice is that Boaz is overwhelmed by what she has asked, and is filled with joy about it, and likes it. And he is a man of honor, and there's nothing improprietous happening here, and he doesn't take advantage of her. He actually says, I'm going to sort this out in the morning. So, we have an expression in, life that says when we have troubles, we lay them at the feet of Jesus, don't we? And I don't know if this is the story where it came from, where she's laying at the feet of Boaz in her time of trouble, in her time of darkness. But, in a way, Ruth is laying her trouble at Boaz's feet with trust and humility. And we could lay our troubles at the feet of Jesus, because remember, Boaz is that Christ-like character. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your cares upon him, because he cares for you. Okay? Ruth then gets straight to the point when he wakes up and finds that she's there. He's a little shocked. And when she asks Boaz to redeem her, she says it this way. Listen, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. That's Ruth 3:9. And Boaz, earlier in Ruth chapter 2, says this, and this is also about spreading the wings over. The Lord repay you for what you have done. He's speaking to Ruth about all the good she'd done that he'd noticed. The Lord repay you for what you have done, and full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. That's Ruth 2:12. She's asking him to marry her and be her protector. Okay, and we see this idea of being covered again in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel 16:8 uses the same terminology, and when God is relating to Israel through the prophet, and he says, I spread my wing over you and covered your nakedness. Yes, I swore an oath to you and entered into a covenant with you, and you became mine, says the Lord God. He's talking about marriage. He's saying that when he covers his wing over his own, it is like he's saying, you're mine. Like a parent would say, you're mine. Or a husband would say of his wife, you're mine. And he is, as Christians, his church is his bride. We are the ones, and we are covered by his wings in covenant. And the covenant is of the blood of his son. Okay? So there is covenant. We are married to God. We are his bride. Okay. And as Christians, when we read this and see this romance of Ruth and Boaz, it's like our romance with Christ. We actually, not in a way, but actually belong to him. 1 Corinthians 6 says this, we are not our own, but we are bought with a price. Okay, we are his. All right, so when you are in a time of trouble and in a time of darkness and in a time that's hard, you can remind yourself of that promise that you are his. He covers you with his wings, and he says, you are mine. Okay? Okay. But there's a small problem here for Boaz, that there is a nearer relative who has a right of being the goel before Boaz does. And Boaz, this is to show his character. He is so upright, he is so honest, that he doesn't want to go about getting Ruth into his life, getting her as a wife, through dishonest means, almost like stealing her. So he goes to this other man and he says, this is your right. You could have this land. You could be the one who is the goel for Naomi and Ruth. but the man decides he doesn't want that because he's already married and he has children, and it might ruin the inheritance he has for his children that he already has. So he passes it over to Boaz, and Boaz gets the girl. Yeah. And I love that, because I hate a love story when, the guy doesn't get the girl, or the girl doesn't get the guy, whatever, it makes me unhappy. So we're so happy that Boaz and Ruth now are together, and there is love there. It is a cute and beautiful story about how they love each other. Chapter 4, Boaz goes to the city gates where this whole thing happens with this other potential Goel, and that's where it happens, because in the city gates is where all the legal things would have been carried out. And so something like this would have happened in the city gates. There would have been elders there, older people of the city who would witness it, and that would be it. That's how they legally did stuff at the city gate. Okay, so lots of good stuff happened in a place at the city gate. Okay, and Boaz says in chapter 4, verse 9, to the elders and all the people, "You are witness this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Kilion's and Mahlon's from the hand of Naomi. I've done it," he said. "I have redeemed them." So we see this perfect redemption to Ruth and Naomi, and their loved ones' names are perpetuated. A child is born who is called Obed, who I'll tell you about in a second, and their land is restored to them. Poverty and shame lifted off of them, and we see in verse 16 of chapter 4 a beautiful, beautiful picture of Naomi holding her grandson. She who had nothing, now holds a grandson in her hands. His name's Obed, which means worshiper. And then there is a short genealogy which is given that shows that Obed begets Jesse, and Jesse begets David, okay, which turns out to be King David, who was the greatest king of the Old Testament. King David. And funny enough, his grandfather Obed means worshiper. So David, the great worshiper, the one who wrote the beautiful songs, we see that heart of worship is from a line of worship. Okay, beautiful. So remember that this account is all happening in a very dark time in Israel. But we have this snapshot of God's grace where we're being reminded that those of us who choose to remember God and to live for Him, even when others around you choose the easy way, I'm just going to go with the culture. It's just easier to do that. Like Orpah, Ruth's sister-in-law. It was convenient for her. She didn't want to go on the journey. She just, thought, all right, I'll just stay here. But look at Ruth's life. Even look at Naomi's life because of Ruth. God is still a rewarder of those that diligently seek Him. That is Hebrews 11:6. And we see that in the Book of Ruth. We see that in the Book of Hebrews in the New Testament. And here's my favorite thing. And this is where I'm going to end it, okay? Because it's time. We're done now. My favorite thing is this, that in the time of the Judges, a great time of darkness, really, really great darkness, okay? There's a small storyline going on in a tiny place, seemingly insignificant, Bethlehem. There's a romance and a coming together of two very ordinary people who both love God and who honor God with their lives, and they want to serve His purposes. And it's as if a small but a piercing light has just broken through the deep darkness as we see where this relationship leads. And we see that through these people, these obedient people of God in a time of darkness, this small remnant when no one else wants to serve God, when no one else is seeing how it should be and why they're not blessed, these two people, they get it right in honoring God. And we see that the redemption of God is still on course. When in our own lives, when we're in great darkness and it looks like the enemy's winning, could we please remind the enemy that he's already lost? Could we just remind him that he's already lost? Read the last page where he gets chucked into the sea of fire, okay, the lake of fire. He's got to be reminded of this, because he's trying to get people to believe that the great darkness means he's won. He's won. I've won. There's not enough of you. You want to know something? Even that little remnant, when they remember that God is not shaken in darkness. He's not taken back by the darkness, but his plan of redemption marches on, even through the great darkness. And you know what? I love it, how God does it. And it's so small and it seems so insignificant. This little couple in Bethlehem, when all the rest of the promised land is not following God, and there's so few of God followers, that we see a light breaking through, and that the light of God is more piercing and more powerful than all of the darkness that the devil can bring, that the enemy can bring. Okay? That little light pierces through, and it says, and the darkness can't even comprehend it. You know? And let's remember that our romance with Jesus is a beautiful thing in a dark time. And I'm going to end with this verse. John 12:46. This is it. I have come as a light to shine in the dark world. This is Jesus saying this. I have come as a light to shine in this dark world, so that all who trust in me will no longer wander in darkness. Jesus is beautiful. He's the light of the world, and we all need him in a time of great darkness. But the beautiful thing is we have him. We just need to acknowledge him and acknowledge his truth. You know what? That's the end now. I want you to have a beautiful week this week. I want you to think about the Book of Ruth. I want you to think about redemption in a time of darkness. If you're going through a time of darkness, remember, even the smallest bit of light is greater than an immense darkness. Jesus wins. Amen. Have a great week.